How often do you make up stories in your mind about yourself or other people or situations that reinforce something that you believe about yourself? Generally, not being enough. Today I'm going to share with you a personal experience that I had that was kind of eye-opening and was a pivotal point in my understanding of how impactful the things that we hold on to that are not necessarily based in truth, we have no evidence of, can impact us. Welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you for joining me. If you're new or haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and click the little bell for notifications. So every time that I share something about my own personal experience, there are often comments, but I end up getting messages from people that are just kind of personal in nature, and they share that it's really helpful to hear. So my goal for this year is to share a little bit more about my own personal experience in life. So today I'm going to share something with you that really was pretty pivotal in helping me see just how powerful basically those lies that we make up are. So you may already know this, but my siblings are 9 and 10 years older than I am. I have a sister who's 9 years older, and my brother was 10 years older than me. And we were not raised together. They were raised by my grandparents when they were about, I think, 4 and 5 years old. They went to live with my grandparents that lived a couple and a half, 3 hours away from where I grew up until I was about 10. So I didn't really have like a normal sibling relationship with my brother and sister. And growing up, my life with my mom was quite different than my siblings' life with my grandparents. My grandparents were really the only stable thing in my life. And I got to see them periodically, and I spent my birthdays early in my life with them. I had a good relationship with my grandparents, and I am so grateful because I really do think that that stability and the relationship that I had with them played a huge role in the way that I was impacted, and when I started healing, helped me in my healing. It provided, again, stability. It provided a sense of safety to the degree that I could feel safe. However, and this is an important part of it, because I saw such stark differences in the ways that my life were and the ways that I perceived their life to be. The fact that my grandparents took them and raised them to have a better life. And my understanding is, and I don't know all the details, and almost everybody except for my sister actually have passed away. I don't have a lot of information, but when I was a kid, I was told, I believe by my grandparents, that the reason that they were raised, or that they raised my siblings, is because if they hadn't taken them, then Child Protective Services was going to put them in foster care. So my grandparents raised them. And 9 years later, I came along, and my grandmother told me this, that she told my mom when she was pregnant with me that basically no matter what, she had to raise me, and my grandparents weren't going to take me. I don't remember what the context of that story was. My grandmother was not a particularly cruel person or anything like that. So I don't think she intended for it to land in the way that it did. But what I took from that statement, and I was pretty young when she said that to me the first time, what I took from that statement was she didn't want to be burdened with me. That no matter what, she wasn't willing to step in. And by the time I heard that story, I had already experienced abuse and neglect. which means that I already believed that I was bad, that I was unworthy, that it was my fault. So when she said that, it reinforced that. Can you relate? What you were told or what you experienced might have been different, but it's an example of how we take things in. We really internalize them as evidence of what we believe is true. So that was kind of one of the early things. And then, of course, my grandparents were not at all wealthy. They were very probably lower middle class, but at the time they seemed wealthy to me because I grew up in poverty. We were evicted many times growing up. We didn't have food in the refrigerator many times. And so when I would compare, you've heard me talk about comparison, I compared all the time. And I compared myself to my siblings. I compared my situation to my siblings' situation. I compared that my grandparents didn't want me and they took my siblings in and raised them. So that had to mean something, right? So my siblings got to do different kinds of activities and different kinds of things, and they went on trips every once in a while, and my life growing up was very different. Again, I did spend some birthdays with my grandmother in particular, and she would throw me a birthday party and bake me a cake, and I loved it on one hand, but on the other hand, it was hard to take in because I was already believing, right, that I wasn't good enough. So again, how we believe something, and even when something good is happening, we can't really allow ourselves to fully take it in and experience it for what it is. So while I was grateful on one hand, it didn't necessarily mean a whole lot at the time. So, and I would spend like a month with them, and again, we lived kind of far away, and so that was nice, but I felt like I didn't belong. So I compared all the time. And then as I got a little bit older, continued the comparing and believed that I wasn't good enough. And then when I was about 13 years old, so when I was 10, we moved to the same town that my grandparents lived in. And we moved around a lot, and I had actually lived in that town for a period of time, and then we moved away. We moved back and forth all over the place all the time. But at 10, we moved to that area and stayed there. And we lived with my grandparents for a little while, but not for a particularly long period of time. When I was 13, my mom was going to move out to the middle of nowhere, and I was 13. I had a boyfriend. I was terrified of losing. I didn't want to move out there. We didn't have a car much at the time, and so I felt like I was going to be trapped out there. And I got up enough nerve, courage to ask if I could stay with my grandparents, because I wanted to be close to my school so that I could walk back and forth to my boyfriend's house, to my friend's house, because we were, I think it was like about 45 minutes away. And especially when you don't have a car, and I wasn't able to drive anyway, that's a long way. And my grandmother said no. And in that moment, I was devastated, because in that moment, not only did all that fear come up about what I was going to be missing out on or losing out on, and that my boyfriend was going to get tired of not seeing me and he was going to break up our relationship. But in that moment, there was no way to tell myself that she didn't really mean that I wasn't good enough, because she didn't come out and say that I couldn't live with them. But in that moment, it was absolute proof that no matter what, I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy enough, that she didn't love me enough, love me as much as she loved my siblings. That was absolute, irrefutable evidence. And then I just continued to believe that. And again, it was really confusing because while there was incredible hurt around that, I didn't consciously think of it, but that is the reality. In fact, I tried not to think about it. So I had that, but at the same time, my grandparents were, again, like the only stability that I had. They were the only constant. My grandparents were married my entire life. They were married to each other from the very young until they died. So they were a source of stability, and they were relatively healthy people. I wouldn't say really healthy. There were definitely a lot of issues there, but definitely the healthiest thing that I had ever been a part of. So trying to hold both of those realities was quite confusing as a kid because I was hurt, but at the same time, I needed that. And so I couldn't completely separate myself from it. Time goes on, and I don't remember how old I was, but I had already started my healing, and I don't remember even what made me think about this. But I was thinking about something related to the hurt I had experienced or what I believed about not being good enough to be raised by them. Might have even been thinking about how things might have been different had I been raised by them. And it was like lightning. All of a sudden, completely out of the blue, I had this moment and I thought to myself, I wonder what it was like for them to not grow up with my mom. And it was such a kind of shocking moment of awareness because all my life I had been so caught up in the fact that my grandparents didn't want me and what that meant for my life. It meant that I lived in poverty, that I didn't get to do any activities. I didn't get to go to gymnastics. I didn't get to play the violin or the flute. I didn't get to travel anywhere other than back and forth to their house or my house. I was so into everything that meant for me and so consumed by it that I never really thought about it because I believed that they were much better off than I was. And I think in the bigger picture, they were. But in that moment, I recognized what might it have been like for them? What beliefs did they hold around the fact that my mom didn't raise them, that our mom didn't raise them? And I wondered, do they feel bad? Did they feel like my mom gave up on them? Did they feel like my mom didn't want them? And I didn't have a conversation with either of them. And I believe my brother would have still been alive at that point. But I just had that moment of awareness and I wondered about it, but I didn't act on it at all. But just recognizing that there was like another side to that story made a difference. I began to be able to see something from a little bit of a different perspective. Fast forward many years later, my grandmother had just died about 6 weeks earlier. My grandfather was now dying, and my mom died much earlier. I don't remember now, I'd have to do the math, but my mom died when I was 23 years old. And my sister and I were there together, and I'm pretty sure that was the night. And I don't remember the conversation exactly, but I remember sharing that with her. And I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but I was not far off. And the thing that I had held on to so deeply to reinforce that I wasn't enough, on the flip side, they likely held on to as evidence that they were not enough. That why didn't my mom fight harder? Why did she never try to get them back? And I don't know if she ever did or not, but there all the questions from their perspective, from their experience, even comparing the enoughness that I was enough for my mom to want to keep, and that isn't the reality, that isn't the truth, because right in my mind she didn't have a choice. So really in my mind, that was something that I thought about. It wasn't that my mom wanted me and didn't want them. It was that my mom didn't have a choice but to keep me. But of course, my siblings had a very different experience. And we hold on to those things because we believe them to be true. And most of the time, our perception of what is true or real is not the whole picture. Sometimes it's a completely wrong picture, but rarely is it completely true. And in recognizing that, I had already done a lot of healing at that point, but in recognizing that and seeing just how significantly we can hold on to something so deeply, believe with every ounce of our being, have it influence so much about how we view ourselves and even how we show up in the world. And then to learn that it wasn't at all true. And an important thing here is that experience, that reality is true for every single one of us. The circumstances are likely going to be different. But those things that we hold on to as evidence are not, in fact, evidence at all. The only thing they're evidence of is that you have the ability to find a way to make something fit with what you already believe, which is what we do as humans. That's natural. We all do that. And part of the reason that I wanted to share this with you is because I know that there's going to be aspects of this that you can relate to in terms of the things that you've held on to, the things that you can point to, things that people have actually said to mean something, when in all reality it may not mean what you think that it does. I always believed that my grandparents could not have possibly loved me as much as they loved my siblings. To me, it was proof, or it was proved by the fact that they didn't raise me, because I was not raised in a good environment or a healthy environment. Aside from opportunities, it was just not a good environment. And if they loved me, then wouldn't they have wanted to save me from that too? And that wasn't the reality. I think they actually felt bad about taking my brother and sister. I know that they loved me. I couldn't fully believe that at the time. I'm not sure why I'm getting emotional now. I think it's grief. Because I think, unfortunately, it wasn't until after they were gone and I had some conversations that I was able to really deeply trust that that was true. that it wasn't about me specifically. Even her telling me that I couldn't live with him at 13. I mean, I got into some trouble, so that might have been part of it. But I don't think that it was purely about me. But I sure did feel like it was. I sure was hurt as if it was. And I think about what might have been different if for all those years I wouldn't have been so focused on looking for that evidence to prove that I wasn't enough compared to my siblings. So I'd like to encourage you to think about, what is it that you hold on to? Maybe it's something from the past. Maybe it's something from more current times. What are the things that you hold on to as proof or evidence of what you believe about who you are or what's possible for your life? What if a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, you have an experience that helps you see that that is never true? You don't have to wait till then. You can start recognizing that now. You can start by just creating space to consider, is it possible that maybe what you're believing is not true? That maybe the hurt that you're feeling is not based in something that you hold on to as evidence of not being good enough? Because I can assure you that there is no evidence, no real evidence that you are not enough or that you are not worthy or lovable. That I know for sure. So I'm a little surprised by that emotion. I wish I had been able to trust in that they loved me all those years ago. What a difference it would have made. And nothing changed from the time I didn't believe it to the time that I did believe it, other than being able to be open to accepting that it was true. That's it. That is it. I know it's not easy, but that is real. So, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, your experiences in the comments. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up so other people can find it too. And again, if you haven't yet subscribed, please do so and make sure to click the little bell for notifications. Thanks so much for watching. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.